welcome to a podcast about something where actually today you have been caught up in Operation Switcheroo. Since it's April 1st, which everyone knows is April Fool's Day, we've partnered with some great podcasts to switch feeds for the day. You're actually not going to be listening to a podcast about the Battle of Thermopylae on today, April 1st. You'll be listening to an episode of Self Shoots the Shit by Joshua Self. So stay tuned, listen to that, and then tomorrow we will be back to the regular scheduled programming, and you can listen to a podcast about the Battle of Thermopylae, which is what you actually came for. But since it's April Fool's Day, we played a little prank on you, and you're listening to something else. If you really want to hear this episode today, you can't wait, go over to the feed for Odd Dad Out, and you can listen to my podcast about the Battle of Thermopylae instead of listening to Self Shoots the Shit. But I really encourage you to listen to this. It may be something you never heard before. You may find something you like. So give it a try if you're here already. And then come back tomorrow for the actual episode on the Battle of Thermopylae. Thank you for listening. Stay classy.
Hello, everyone. What's up, people? I've hijacked your station to bring you the sound of my voice from my lips straight to your ear canal. I am Joshua Self, and this is Something About a Podcast. I want to talk a little bit about why it's so hard for people to understand each other when we all have different experiences. And because we've had different experiences, it's difficult sometimes for us to really recognize experiences of someone else as valid. For example, I drive for Uber on the weekends mostly, and I've had, a lot of stories and a lot of experiences doing it. And sometimes, when my car is in the shop or I'm in a different city, I'll ride with Uber. And talking to other people has just given me a different perspective on it, because I keep hearing these stories of these really terrible drivers that other people have ridden with, or these terrible passengers that other people have had to drive around town. But I've always been a great driver, although I imagine that there might be one or two people who feel differently. And I've always felt like my experiences as being a rider have pretty much all been positive. Like, there's been, a tip or two here and there, but overall, I feel like I've both received and given a very positive experience. So when I hear people tell me about these terrible experiences that they've had with their passengers or their drivers, it's just like, well, where does that come from? It becomes difficult for me to give validity to someone else's perspective, because I just haven't had that type of experience for myself. But I think it's important for people to really take the time to recognize that other people are just going to have a different life experience. And it doesn't make it less valid. So I know I haven't had anyone throw up in my car as a driver, but other people have. And so that kind of experience is like, well, I know it's got to exist. And sometimes it's difficult for me to really accept that it is a thing for someone else, but it is. There are a lot of people who fear being a driver at night. Like, they don't want it. They don't want to be that uncomfortable because of the number of people that are drunk getting in your vehicle, which is true. Like, typically when I Uber at night, I would say close to 9% of the passengers are somewhere between drunk and passing out. So that's been my experience for the most part. But the people that are drunk are just usually not hard to deal with, though. There were a few that were, difficult, but most of them are pretty easy to get along with. They're mostly friendly, and I think a lot of it, these experiences create the situation where, because of the way I go into it, my expectations versus the way someone else might go into it, all these things can affect how you experience the different people and whatnot that's going on. I think it's just really important that we accept the opinions of others as their experience, and we don't try to act as though your experience is the only one that's possible. So when I went to Orlando a few weeks ago, I had an Uber driver who got a little bit upset with me because when I put in the location, I was standing on the corner of the road, like at an intersection. It's in a neighborhood, so it's not like a busy street, like a 2-lane road. It's in the middle of a Saturday, so there's not like morning traffic or evening traffic or anything. So there's basically no other cars on the road. However, in Florida, there's apparently a law where ride shares like Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, etc., are now allowed to pick up pedestrians from the main part of the street. Like they have to pick them up either from like a side street or from the driveway or a parking lot, that kind of thing. So, my experience had been you want to put yourself on a main street because I currently live in Memphis, and typically when I have an Uber driver pick me up, I try to get as close to the main street as possible. It just makes it easier, more convenient for the driver to just come and scoop me up. So for people in this other part of the world to have a completely different experience, and because we have different experiences and we have a different expectation going into this scenario, those different expectations cause friction. And I believe we were able to, resolve it. It was just like a quick conversation. It's like, okay, I didn't understand that's how it was here. And it was able to be resolved, easily. Like it wasn't like a big deal. It was a little deal, just a little one. But I think when we have people who have had these different experiences encounter each other and these different expectations, you often create like these frictions that sometimes are not so easy to resolve. Recently, I've been dating this amazing woman, and yesterday was her birthday. Happy birthday, babe. So one of the issues that came up from my perspective is that her expectation from dealing with her own father, like she had called her father this previous week, like we were supposed to meet him, and he opted to not respond to her phone call. He messaged her on her birthday, tell her happy birthday, that kind of thing. But she had tried to reach out to him, but he just never responded to it. And my experience with my own father is that usually if I call him or I text him, he'll respond, within 6 hours or so at the most. If he's at work, he might not be able to get back to me immediately. But once he's free, he'll reach out and be like, hey, what's going on? Is there anything you need, etc. So for her to have this experience, and for me to have a completely different experience, and it creates like this thing where we're able to really appreciate what we do have. Like once we understand that what we have is not necessarily the norm, it makes it a lot easier to really appreciate it, to really enjoy the things that we have. Like I know when I was a child, the type of discipline that I would receive, I didn't like it. And now as an adult, I can say that I appreciated what I received, as a kid. But my parents have been married for 34, going on 35 years. So as a child, my assumption is that the norm is parents being married for however many years. But then as I get older, it's like, oh, most parents are not married for this long. And a lot of people just don't have their parents together at all. Some of them, the father is absent like altogether. Some of them, the mom is absent altogether. Like these type of things were just like, well, it's hard to really appreciate what you have until you understand that everybody doesn't have it. Then you're like, okay, well, maybe I have something special here. Maybe I have something exclusive almost. So I'm grateful for my parents and the opportunities I've had with them, I had no idea what I was getting, as when I was younger. And it's only now when I see that other people didn't have it, it's like, oh, y'all really did give me something special. So I think it's important for us to really hold on to things that we have, to really cherish what we do get in this life, and understand that everybody doesn't have the same opportunities that we have. Everybody doesn't get the same privileges, the same everything that we get. So when we have instances of like a black person or a woman or a trans person feeling like they were discriminated against because of whatever reason, often it's because our expectation is different. Like, we don't have the same type of problems that someone else might have, so we assume that they don't actually really have those problems. So if a person's having trouble with the law, or they're having trouble getting employed or maintaining employment, our assumption that it has nothing to do with whatever that they're struggling with is. And I think we should be more considerate of the other problems that people have. Before I met my current girlfriend, I dated here and there. I remember one instance in particular that really kind of shook me to my core. A friend of mine, his wife had passed, so he was back in the dating world like almost a year later. And it was mostly due to my encouragement. I was like, I know you've been grieving, you gotta get back out there. I don't want you walling in the house like all the time. So I encouraged him to get back out there, and he did. He met a girl, things are going well. There was one day where I'm talking to him, we're outside like a restaurant or whatever, and he was talking to his girlfriend on the phone, and I asked him just kind of like out of the blue, I was like, well, does she have a friend? And so he was just like, okay. Then he asked her, and she says yes. And so then I told him, I was like, well, you know where this is leading, right? And he was like, yeah. So we worked to set up like a double date, and I was like, okay, cool. So everything seems to be fine. Like, she wants like a picture of me. It's like, no biggie, whatever. And then it's like, oh, I can't date you because I don't date black people. And while I know it's like it was not my friend's fault, I was really hurt because it had nothing to do with, am I a nice guy? Am I gonna treat her right? Like, am I respectable or anything like that? It's simply because of like skin color. It's like, oh, I can't talk to you because of your skin color. And that's something that really, really hurt me. And it's something that I think a lot of people feel it doesn't really happen, and yet it does. So the same when people have had, bad experiences with their Uber drivers. So, well, that doesn't really happen to me. And so it's hard for me to fully understand that that actually is a thing. When this happened to me, the woman not wanting to spend any time with me at all simply because I was black. It's something that does happen. I think it's important for people to understand that when people tell their stories of their own life experience, we don't need to brush it off like, oh, it doesn't really happen, So recently, Cardi B, there's a video that came out where she was like, she drugged men and stole from them and this kind of thing back when she was a stripper. And a lot of people have been upset about it. And there's some people that are kind of defending it. I think it's important to understand, one, that type of lifestyle is different than what most of us live in America. And most of us have no idea what it's like to be a stripper. Most of us have no idea even what it's like to really be a patron at a strip club. There's a certain type of element that you have to be able to protect yourself from. You have to try to insulate yourself from as someone who works in a strip club. And it's difficult because you have to be very friendly, very open in terms of like who you interact with. Like you can't really afford to close yourself off from most people because like you need them to give you money. But a lot of the people in these environments are unsavory characters at best. Like you have pimps, you've got drug dealers, you've got rapists, and then you've got a bunch of other people that are kind of like generally good guys, so to speak. But to differentiate between a murderer and a non-murderer is difficult in, you know, a 3-minute span. So a lot of strippers have to develop like this switch that they can turn on and off basically whenever they need to in order to protect themselves from a person who might want to do them harm. And so it's difficult sometimes to, when you're in that environment, it's very easy to get caught up in, you know, wanting to make sure that you're protected, wanting to make sure that you're straight. But I think it's also important to understand that like if someone is opting to be a stripper, they're doing that as opposed to working like a regular job. It's not that a stripper is somehow less than another person, but they feel like they don't want to work a regular job. And they're basically trying to set the scenario where men, for the most part, will give them money for them doing as close to nothing as possible. Now, if you ask them, they feel like they're doing a lot. If you ask me, I feel like they're not doing a lot. And this is me as a patron of strip clubs. So we have this scenario where she drugged some people and robbed them. And one of the guys who spoke out about it, at least implies, I don't know if it's proven necessarily, that he had sex with her, even though he wasn't conscious while it was happening. And so the thing that comes up is like, well, is she a bad person now because of what she did before? And I think what she did before was pretty normal for this type of environment. And that's one of the things that I think people have a hard time with. The idea that a person can produce something good that they like and still do something that's not good, that they don't like, that is harmful to someone else. The assumption that a person has to be good all the time versus some of the time they're good, some of the time they're not really good. If there's really no such thing as a good person or a bad person. Like people do things, and some things that they do are good, some things that they do are not good. And even amongst that, what someone does that I might consider to be bad, someone else might not consider to be bad. So like the girl who said she doesn't want to date me because I'm black, I feel like that was bad. But there are other people who would say that it's not really that bad. Like this, they would say something like that's her preference or whatever. So we have this difficulty that shows up all the time where we're trying to explain our experience to someone else, and the other person's like, well, that's not been my experience. And it's just really important that we understand, you know, how people see things. There was this time I was at Walmart, and I'm in the checkout line. It's very crowded. I made the mistake of going to Walmart on a Saturday in the middle of it. So the cashier is a black woman, and everyone that's in the line presently is black. Well, the cashier has her light off, and she tells the person at the end of the line, if anyone comes behind you, let them know that I'm not taking any other customers. Like, I'm now closed. And I don't know how many of you guys have really done a lot of shopping in grocery stores lately, but when I worked at Kmart, shout out to Kmart, or maybe I should say farewell to Kmart, condolences, goodbye, I don't know how that works. Many years ago, my first job ever, that was my experience. Like, you turn your light off and you tell the person at the end of the line that you're not taking anybody else because you gotta either you're clocking out or you're going to break or whatever the case is. So this lady at Walmart tells the lady at the end of the line, anybody comes behind you, I'm closed, that's it. Customer comes up, lady at the end of the line says, she's closed, customer moves on. Another person comes up, she's closed, person moves on. So, true story, a white man in a wheelchair rolls up, and the woman at the end of the line says, she's closed, and instead of just moving on, he shouts out, racist, and then he rolls on. And when I heard him say that, I immediately understood why he would feel that way. Because he rolls up as a white man, everyone in the line is black, the cashier is black, and so it can look like she doesn't want him in the line because he's white. Now, obviously that is not the case from my perspective, but his experience is different because he didn't hear the woman say to the other one at the end of the line that you're the last person, that no one else is coming after you. And so when we have, different experiences, different expectations, it comes up often where we just have these disagreements that end up sometimes causing a lot of friction. Sometimes they don't cause that much friction, and other times, we have school shootings and church bombings and these tragedies that we've seen is often the result of people having different experiences, different expectations, and not knowing how to navigate through the differences. So when we talk about having these differences of opinion, differences in experience, the critical part that I would want anybody to really know is how to navigate through it. And so it's important to really be around people who are different than you, to talk to people who have had different experiences than you have, so we can understand, how to really get through things that are different, And I've been privileged myself with having the opportunities to travel. Like I've, been to Europe a couple times and, other countries where things are so much different. Like they're the same and yet they're very, very different. And I've done a lot of traveling across the U.S. And again, you get to see people that are the same as you, people that are different, and just having these conversations with people who have had a different background than you just gives you a chance to really understand how to, move through differences without it causing the type of friction that, leads to whether it's an argument or to violence or to just a general misunderstanding of someone who's different, and instead leads you to appreciate the things that you do have, appreciate the things that you would like, appreciate the things that you've been given, whether you ask for them or not. So an example of, I was in Bilbao, Spain last year, and one of the things that had happened was the guy that I was staying with, my roommate, he got drunk, and as a result of being drunk, he overpaid for his meal. Basically, he paid for the food, he was given change back, and then because he was drunk, forgot that he actually paid, and so all this change that he got back, he left on the table, basically in his mind, paying for the meal, even though he had already paid for it. And then he left. So he's walking around, he and I are walking, like an hour and a half later, he sobers up a little bit and realizes he's like 50 euros short. He's like, where did the other 50 euro go? Like, I know I have this money, I don't know where it is. So he backtracks, he's in the hotel, looking for his stuff. He's like, I can't find it. He tries to backtrack to different stores, maybe I dropped it somewhere. And eventually it dawns on him that at the restaurant, he basically paid for the meal twice. So he goes back, talks to them, and they're just kind of like, you left that money as a tip. We can't give it back to you. And he's like, there's no way you actually thought that was a tip. Like, I basically paid like triple for the food. So they go back and forth, and basically he's just like, this is ridiculous. So he wants to talk to, like the local authorities or whatever. So we find like the local authorities, the people who deal with tourist issues. And they just had like a 3-way conversation, which basically amounts to, you're not getting your money back, but here's a bottle of wine on the house. It's kind of like a peace offering, so to speak. And because he had a different expectation, like, he made a mistake, clearly. But I think if he had been in America, the odds of him giving his money back would have been much higher, just because you want to go so far out of your way for like customer service and all this kind of thing, as opposed to another country where they're probably less fearful of a lawsuit and that kind of stuff. One of the things that happened, while I was in Bilbao, Spain, was the food. And when I ask for food that is well done, my expectation is that it's going to be kind of brown, light gray almost throughout the entire piece of meat. So when I ordered food from them, it was well done. Basically, there was just like, it was no blood. It was definitely a lot of pink. And it was kind of like, I was like, this is not really well done. But their expectation was like so much different than mine was. Like, this is what they're used to. This is what they do over there. And it kind of gave me appreciation for food here, things that I kind of take for granted. When I went to Ireland, I had, quote, pancakes and bacon and eggs. And I use the quote because their pancakes were not really pancakes. It was more like wafers, like really big wafers. And they didn't have maple syrup at all. And I wanted to punch somebody. Like, I don't want pancakes without maple syrup. I don't want my pancakes to be like a wafer. I want it to be kind of fluffy, kind of light. And so it just allowed me to appreciate, things I have here. Now, their bacon, it was so thick and meaty. It was delicious. Easily the best bacon I've had my entire 32 years of existence on this planet Earth. But their pancakes, or whatever they call them, I'll pass. Like, if I'd never get that again, be great. But these different experiences really just allow us to appreciate what we have. And I think it's really important to just really appreciate the stuff that we have. Thank you all for hanging out with me. One last thing before I go. The whole Cardi B situation, it seems like it's mostly the result of people just not having that kind of experience, like not knowing really what's going on. So if you go to any environment that you've never been to before, ask somebody, please. This dude, I can't remember, Kevin Smith, I believe, which is like the most generic name possible on the face of the earth. He says he was feeling her and he invited her to come back to his hotel. So it's just him and her. Now, if it's just you and one other person, that's basically a complete stranger to you, I feel like you should be on guard. And if you've never done this type of thing before, ask your friends, ask your buddies, someone who has done this type of thing before. Because apparently he gets drugged, wakes up, all his money's gone, and he doesn't have any way to get in contact with her. He's like, I can't believe this thing happened to me. Like, this girl just robbed me. If you're in a situation and you have no idea what to expect, you should always ask somebody, because making decisions when you know ahead of time that you actually don't know, that's stupid. It's like, why would you want to do that to yourself? Like, you're setting yourself up for failure. Like, if I say I want to go on a diet, but I don't know anything about dieting, like, why would I not first consult like a doctor or a fitness instructor, a nutritionist, someone who would have knowledge in this area? And likewise, if I'm going to go to a strip club, I'm going to ask people who have been, like, what is it like? Like, what's the environment like? And if anyone out there is planning on going to a strip club and you don't know, ask me. I know. I've been there. Like, I understand the environment. I understand how everything works. But don't go somewhere that could potentially be dangerous and not have any idea what's going on. Like, you should consult people who know before you do this. I'm heavily considering getting married, and so yesterday I wanted to take the time to talk to my dad about what I'm supposed to do. Like, what are the things that I should expect to do? Like, what should I be working on before I make this decision? That sort of thing. Because I've never been married before, and I wanted to do it as best as I possibly can. So for everybody out there, if you don't know about something and you have to make a decision based on something that you actually don't know, ask somebody, please. It'll help us all out. I mean, I can't really blame Cardi for doing what she did. Like, this is expected behavior from her as a stripper. And for someone to be surprised by it, be weird, like, I can't believe someone would do this. Like, well, you just don't know strippers very well. Like, if you give them money, they will take it. If you don't give them money, they will take it. And so if you know that going in, you can safeguard yourself. Thank you all for spending time with me. You can find me on Twitter at MagusOftheM. Appreciate it. Want to give a big shout out to Calvin and his show, A Podcast About Something. I've had a good time listening to it. I checked out a few episodes before I jumped on here. And I want to give a big shout out to Moxie, the host of Your Brain on Facts, for organizing this whole switcheroo. It's been a great time. I really appreciate the experience.